Hello, my name is Ben Lindsay. I am CEO and founder of Powder Fight, and it is a great pleasure to have one of our ambassadors, Guvna B. Introduce yourself, please. How are we going to do this? Yeah, all this. Is that the East London?
East London mixed with Ghana.
Oh, see.
You done it well though. You executed correctly.
Thank you. It's all about the click, right?
Click's very important. I'm Guvna B. My mum named me Isaac. I'm a rapper, author, broadcaster, and a proud ambassador of Powder Fight. Not just because I know Ben. He'd actually be the main reason that I wouldn't do it. But I actually believe massively in the work that they're doing. I see the impact, and I want more people to see that as well.
Appreciate you, bro. We could get into how we know each other and all the times I've saved your life and all that type of stuff. There's quite a few stories in the last 10 years, but maybe for another podcast. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, so it's really important that we have people who represent Powder Fight but also understand a lot of the work that we do around wellbeing and with young people. Why Powder Fight? I mean, I imagine there must be loads of pressure on your time to represent various organisations and charities. Why Powder Fight specifically, and not just because I'm a nice guy and you know me and all that type of stuff and I saved your life? Tell me other stuff.
Yeah, there's obviously various issues that we face in our local communities, in society in general, and I don't have the time to be a spokesperson or an ambassador for all of them, as important as they may be. But one of the things that has always been close to my heart, probably because of lived experience and also my values, is the issue of youth violence. I grew up in Custom House on an estate, lost my first friend to a stabbing at 15 years old, and in those times, I'm not that old, but it was still rare. You'd get fights, you'd get people getting rushed, they might retaliate, but when someone gets stabbed, it was like, wow, that escalated to a level that no one expected to get to. And here we are, around 15 years later, in a place where society seems to have desensitized itself to the seriousness of escalating youth violence. And for me, we can never become desensitized. That's dangerous. I think it's sad when anyone loses their life, but I think it's devastating when it could easily have been prevented. And yeah, I had the likes of you, my youth leader at the local youth club, impact me in great ways, and that changed the trajectory of my life. And I want to play my part in being that person for someone else.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's interesting that you talk about the experience of growing up in an estate and seeing violence on a semi-regular basis. You're a bit older, you're no longer in the ends, you drink expensive coffee, you know.
Thank you for this cortado.
Yeah, it's all right. You're in leafy areas now. When you look back, what do you think the impact of those experiences of violence has been on your life?
I think I'm naturally an optimistic person, but when you've seen certain things, when you know people that have been directly impacted by youth violence, when it's come close to your doorstep, when I remember for me seeing my first gun at 11 years old, takes away some of my innocence. And so when I leave my house, you make a joke about me being in leafy suburbs, I'm still not too far away. Do you know what I mean? I think most places in London you'll have nice bits and not so nice bits, but when I leave my house, I'm always on guard. I'm always thinking something could go wrong. I'm always on my P's and Q's. You never lose that. I need to be streetwise. I'm a big man now. I'm 30 odd. I won't tell you the exact age. Okay. But even now, if I'm walking through different ends at night, I'm like, I've got to be careful. I don't know what's going to happen.
So you're telling me you still feel that anxiety and that kind of, I suppose we'll use the word fear. Even though you're a big man now, you can drive wherever you want to go. You're not wanted in any area, to my knowledge. So, but you're still feeling that sense of concern.
Yeah, I'll tell you why as well. If things were the way they were when I was growing up, maybe not. But now, for various reasons, these youths are lawless, bro. And I laugh about it now, but I went back to my estate to film something with the BBC, and when I pulled up to my road, these youngers are looking at me a certain way, and I was like, yo, man, grew up here, bro. I'm one of you lot, man, relax. And anyone can get it, bro. Yeah. And so you can never allow yourself to become so comfortable. But it's interesting because I speak to people that didn't grow up in London, and I feel like they might have like irrational fear, but they can walk the streets with a confidence that I can't. I wouldn't say I'm fearful, but I just know that anything could happen.
It's interesting you say about perception. I shared something on my Instagram recently about a time when I saw you on, I think it was Newsnight.
Yeah.
And you were talking about violence and drill music. And I happened to watch this when I was on holiday in North Wales. And it was quite a strong piece, and they were showing kind of imagery of knives and just people in ballies and all types of stuff. And I was saying to my wife at the time, she's still my wife, I was saying, to make that very clear, I was saying in the location of where we were in Snowdon, I was like, oh, this is crazy, because obviously coming from London, I'm used to this type of imagery, but then when watching it where it was predominantly white people, I was thinking, wow, this is just a really mad representation of young people in London, and how does that play out to them? What does it really look like? So for me, I just found it interesting when we talk about perception and the confusion people sometimes have when they see, and if we're honest, predominantly black children in the context of violence. How do you kind of navigate that, particularly when you're doing music, which some could misunderstand as being just a certain way?
I think the way that perception affects me, plays on my mind and makes me anxious, is I often find myself compensating. So if I'm on the street walking past someone that doesn't look like me, I'll give like the extra smile so that they know like I'm not like that. I'm one of the good guys. I'm a friendly person, and I kind of hate myself for that, because I shouldn't have to overcompensate to prove to someone that I'm not, one of these guys with a belly on and stuff like that. But the interesting thing about what you said is when we watch, I don't know, Top Boy, or see on the news white males, young men, bellied up, because there are a fair few, I don't think people attribute that to the entire race or the entire gender. But when you're in, I can't remember where you were, Shrewsbury or whatever it was, and people see young black males bellied up, for some reason, that's the image of a young black male across the board. And I don't think that's right.
And I think it's important just to clarify that, at least from a Power to Fight perspective, we don't think blackness or black and brown communities equals violence. And we believe that there's a disproportionate effect on black and brown communities, particularly in a London context. But that wouldn't necessarily be in other contexts across the country. But since it is Mental Health Awareness Week, and I think we've touched on it, what do you think are the specific pressure points for anxiety and mental health for black and brown children? Both of us at one point were black and brown kids. But do you think there's something specific? Because it's interesting what you said about changing your posture depending on who's walking towards you.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with my male friends about a similar thing. Oh, let me not look too big when I run, and I'm running, and I'm just, I'm looking like Mr. Motivated, Michael and all that. I'm like, well, let me wear the brightest stuff so people don't think I'm going to rob them and all that type of stuff. But the mental toil, for me personally, I'm like, this is long. Why can't I just be, if I want to wear a tracksuit, why is that like going to be seen as intimidating?
So you hit the nail on the head. I think you just want to be, I think for young black and brown people, a lot of anxiety comes from, especially now, I can only speak from a London perspective and someone that lives in London that travels outside of London, because it's so diverse, it's such a melting pot. You're often in situations that you maybe didn't grow up in, and when you feel like you can't be yourself, it's just a lot of effort. When you have to think about how you're being perceived, it's just a lot of mental strain when you're constantly having to second guess, you know, I got dreads, I'm going to Parliament today, should I have my hair in a ponytail because it's less scary for those kind of
same issue, man. It's like, what should I do with my hair today? But yeah,
do you know what I mean? And you have to get to a certain level of confidence in yourself to think, but what everyone else thinks, I'm just gonna be me. But we're talking about young people with mental health struggles. These are the things that they have to think about, man. Imagine have every decision you make having to think twice, one from your own personal perspective and one from the person who's going to be interacting with you. That's effort.
But also, so we're talking maybe on an individual kind of interpersonal level. I think there's something quite collective, like the collective trauma young people, at least the young people we work with, deal with. So you might hear of an act of violence and then it's spread on social media, and just the amount of imagery that young people kind of deal with, we definitely see that level of anxiety is underestimated with the amount of things that people are seeing. One of the things which, having known you for so long, the passing of your dad, just walking with you through that, and then consequently the album which came from that. I suppose that was one example of how I was able to kind of watch how you would deal with quite a pressurized situation. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how you managed in such a kind of a time of deep loss and sadness? Because I think obviously it's helpful for people who may well be going through that to see what kind of processes that you put in place.
If I'm being honest, I don't think I managed very well initially. My parents are Ghanaian. My dad was kind of typical Ghanaian man, didn't really talk much unless he was like telling me to do something or telling me off, but I never doubted his love for me. I'm the firstborn as well, which is another factor in how I responded, but I was stiff upper lip, keep it moving, got to look after the family. Obviously on the day it happened, everyone be sad, cry, but life has to go on in the sense that I can't afford to let this break me because a lot of people are relying on me. And then I think the conditioning from growing up in the area that I grew up in is no one really wants to be like the moist guy or the victim, or you want to be able to make the choice to be strong. And strength looked like, this can't affect me in a way that my life goes down the pan, but I got to keep it moving. And so I tried to, but about 3 months after, had a bit of a breakdown and cried while I was away in America. And it was like the kind of ugly, like uncontrollable tears. I'm an ugly crier, I'm not going to lie. But after I cried... You're a West Ham supporter, right? So that must happen quite a lot. I never cried at football. One time I cried at football when Luis Suarez handballed it and Ghana got eliminated. I think we all cried that one, but but after I cried, I felt like a massive release and a sense of freedom. And in a way, because I had lost my dad, I lost a lot of fear, because I thought, it's just here today, gone tomorrow, so I can't afford to be at the beck and call of people's perceptions. And then I just said, it's fine to be vulnerable, man. It's fine to shed tears. It's fine to put things in place to help you deal with your emotions properly. And so the main thing I realized is, when people are like, just talk about it, man. Like, just share what you're going through. It's not necessarily that we don't want to do that. Sometimes it's that we don't have the tools. And so I had to learn what the tools were. I had to learn to try and use different methods of communicating. If I'm not...
Like what type of... Because I think this is really helpful, because I still believe, particularly in black and brown communities, or even just the black community, mental health is a taboo subject. I remember my grandma, who was an amazing woman, saying, do you know what, black people haven't got time to be depressed. We just got to crack on, which sounds mad, but that is often the mentality which the older generation would operate.
That's so true, man. Yeah, when I think about my dad, I'm like, he probably didn't have time to think about that stuff because he was trying to make rent that month or whatever it was. But for me, I learned that writing things down was really helpful for me. People would always say, talk about it, and I always received that as verbally. but I'm a slow processor, and for some reason I can get out my thoughts a lot more clearer when I write things down. So I started to write down my feelings, and then I would relay it to the people in my life that I know care about me. So because it's a vulnerable thing to share what you're going through. So I thought, who are the people in my life that have shown that they're loyal, that they love me unconditionally, that have been there for years on years? Those people obviously love me. So these are the people that I'm going to confide in. Started to do that. They started to ask questions, and I'm not the best at it, but it helped me process my thoughts. Another massive thing was starting counseling or therapy. I think you might have actually introduced me to my second one, because my first one was dead. I didn't like her. It's a bit like dating, isn't it? You got to try and find the right one. But
I haven't dated for about 23 years, so I don't know. But yeah, but no, you're right. You do need to find. I mean, I think that's a massive point, and I do remember introducing you to one of those therapists. But yeah, you got to find the right mix and combo.
You do, but then it takes a while to build the rapport, and then I realized there's so many things that go into it. Number one, when you're coming from a place where, don't snitch, don't tell anyone what you're going through, and there's some random person that you've never met asking you these questions about your life. Yeah. First of all, are you sure you're not going to tell anyone this? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for real.
So that trust needs to be built. And then secondly, I was fortunate that I could afford to go to a counsellor privately and pay money. But what annoys me the most, obviously I can say this on this in this conversation, but might be on like a TV station, a news channel. Oh, why don't people just go counselling? Like, wow, they make it sound so easy. But if you're a youth coming from where I'm coming from, so much effort. You got to put your name on the list. Then you got to wait for them to have availability. You might wait a few months. They send you a letter. Come in. You go in. They got bare people to get through. So you're in for like 15 minutes. And you don't even get the opportunity to build the rapport and make it a consistent thing, because the healthcare system holistically is broken. And when it's broken, the most marginalized people lose out. So when people say just go counselling, I'm like, fam, you're making it sound so easy. It's not that easy for everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great segue into the work that we do, because what we aim with our therapeutic intervention for peace program is to try and make well-being and mental health services accessible, particularly for young people, for all the things you've just said there. Unfortunately, there's so many waiting lists. We've worked with young people who unfortunately wanted to have that level of support, couldn't get it, and then a few months later unfortunately lost their lives. So it's absolutely true what you're saying. It's not accessible, and if we're going to be honest, a lot of the type of therapists which are made available are not what we would call culturally sensitive.
Yeah, I was going to say that, because I guess foundationally the themes of what makes someone healthy are transferable. But if I'm talking to my counsellor about a madness on the roads and she has no context, no understanding of how that code works, she's only going to be able to help me a little bit. She might give me the primary tools, but having someone that gets it a little bit more, I feel makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think, yes, basically, I agree. I can't remember the timeline, so did you lose your father and then write your book? Or was that kind of like just before that? Because I feel like what came out in your book, and you have to remind everybody the title and stuff like that. But
yeah, I was in the process of writing a book I wrote a book before my dad passed, but it's not my favourite book that I've written. That was about just a bit biographical. The one that I wrote after my dad passed was called Unspoken Toxic Masculinity, How I Faced the Man Within the Man. And that was about how the experience of losing my dad triggered all these thoughts around mental health, and made me explore it more. And the idea that a young person, whatever race really, needs to be, strong and barbaric and hence go gym and that lift 100 kg like you do. That's not what makes a real man. and exploring that conversation. But I actually was quite reluctant because the mental health conversation is interesting when it comes to the arts. Because now, if you mention mental health, you've automatically got an audience. So I feel like it's become like a strategic thing that people talk about, even if it's not authentic to them. So I was quite reluctant, but yeah, I thought it could help people.
And that's an interesting point, that how things which are quite serious can turn into an industry.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And it's quite scary, right? That I mean, I think we can talk about many things. If you mention particular aspects of diversity, or if you know, like you're saying, you're talking about mental health, you've automatically got an audience. I won't name names, but
it's probably a good idea.
It's probably a good idea, right? But we both know how some resources have come out around this subject, and I'm not even sure you're an expert in that space yet. You've slapped some of these things on there, or mental health labels and stuff, and that is actually quite scary and damaging, because I've had to realise that there are experts in this field, and even in a faith context as well. You know, I see it in a church context. Everyone's a mental health expert. Yeah. It's like, really?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you'll say your goal is. I think when it comes to giving advice, we have to be very careful, because I liken it to, if imagine you go to doctors and you ask him a question and you see a man Googling the answer, bruv. You're gonna be worried, innit? But if you want to share your lived experience without offering advice and share some of the tools that helped you, then go for it. I think more of those conversations are helpful. And also, it's not a one size fits all, man. But we need a breadth of people talking about this, because it just impacts people in different ways.
So we work with young people. Our aim is to help those young people who we engage with their well-being. Everything is in a co-produced, co-designed way, which means we don't just tell young people this is how you're going to engage with the emotional health, mental health conversation. You have children yourself. What would you say to your younger self, young Isaac on the block? What would you say, particularly in this context of how to handle your emotions and your feelings, or anything? What would you say?
First thing I'd say is, can't remember where I heard this, but look after the puddles before they turn into floods. And I think when you identify an issue, when you identify something's making you feel sad, angry, confused, when you're struggling with a situation and you bury it under the carpet, it doesn't go away. It just continues to grow and grow and grow, and you will have to come face to face with it someday. And that's from times when I or people that I've known have been struggling with anxiety or addiction or bullying, whatever it is. It just never goes away. You have to deal with it, and it's always easier to deal with it at the earliest possible point, even though that seems really scary, because when it gets bigger, it's going to seem even more scary, and then even more scary, and you're going to wish, I should have just dealt with it back when it was calm. And then the second thing I'd say is a bit of what I said earlier. Think about the people in your life that have proven their loyalty to you, and be vulnerable with them as early as possible. Don't wait for it to get to the point where you're at a breaking point, and then you realize, they put their arm around me, they was always there for me, I could have shared this earlier, I could have saved myself, months and years of pain.
Interesting choice of words, loyalty, because I think, how do you discern as a young person that loyalty is dependent on the type of person? So like, how do you, and this is a tricky one, right? Because when you're growing up, you're still trying to work out who's real, who's bad breed, who's positive. But so often I've seen with young people that they're loyal to the wrong people. And that's kind of caused, obviously, like drama and pain. What advice would you give to any young person watching this around discerning who to engage with and the type of decisions? And it's a big question, so I
don't know, man. I think the people that influence you in your life, or the people that you trust, just think you have to try and discern what their love looks like. Love looks like safety, trust. The result of love is like a healthy environment. If you're loyal to someone, for example, that's getting you to sell something that you shouldn't be selling, for example, you might have their respect, you might have their influence, but what's that doing to you? Do you know what I'm saying? So I think look at the result of what someone's love looks like. It's a tough question because it's not as easy.
No, but that's a good point though, isn't it? I mean, the idea of examining the fruit of that relationship to then decide whether or not it is actually good or positive.
Yeah.
Without being judgmental.
Yeah.
If somebody's going through something which isn't what you're going through, it's a very unique space to kind of be in.
It is, and the fruit's not always going to be comfortable. Like, how many times have I come to you about something and you've told me a truth that wasn't easy to hear, but you bad me up when you have to bad me up because, like, I'm your guy, innit? And you want the best for me. But I just think we've been loyal to people that offer us a lot less. Yeah. So why would you not give the benefit of the doubt to someone that actually wants good for you? Do you know what I'm saying?
No, that's true.
I'll bad you up as well, though, so just be careful, fam. You better listen when I bad you up, fam.
No, but this is like, I was going to come out with something really smart and funny, but I do think it's important to have this intergenerational conversation, which I don't think happens enough. Like, as someone who's older, we have this like perception and understanding, well, the older guys always get, or the woman's always going to have wisdom. Whereas I sometimes get annoyed at the older generation who don't want to listen to the younger, where you can learn so much. So I won't quite say that you bad me up, but there's been moments where I've come to you for advice and you've said, Ben, rock it this way or whatever.
I agree with that though. My favourite people to spend time with are elderly people, because the times are different, but they've been there, done that, seen it all. And then my kids, fam, because they live life with such innocence and anything is possible, and we need that as well. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. We're closing, but it will be
bored of me already.
I'm bored of you. And we've managed not to go into West Ham, so it's good. But what I think it'd be silly for not to mention the album, because I wanted you just to unpack that a little bit, because the topic, which you'll explain, I think actually has the potential to cause a lot of anxiety for young people. So just unpack the album and just the processes around that and why you did it.
So the album's called The Village Is On Fire, and it's inspired by something that happened to me in my local area. Was on my way back from a coffee shop, trying to get into my car, and there was 3 white guys standing in front of it that wouldn't let me pass. And in a space of about 15-20 seconds, one of them ended up throwing coffee in my face, punching me in my eye. Police came, and even though I called them for help, I didn't appreciate the line of questioning. Questions like, have you ever been in trouble with the police before? Did the guys say anything racist? And that particular question made me feel that post George Floyd, people might have learned how to behave and what not to say, but they haven't necessarily changed like their innermost prejudices. So after that happened, the case was closed. They couldn't find the perpetrators. I needed a kind of release and closure, so I decided to start writing about it. My cousin kind of encouraged me to do so, and the crux of it is, my mum always used to say it takes a village to raise a child in a healthy and safe environment. But when the healthcare system, like we've spoken about, or the education system, or the people in charge of protecting young people, like the police, parents, elders, don't do their job to the best of their ability, it can feel like the village is burning down. And what are we going to do about it? The ideal thing, I guess, is to look at the people in positions of power, structural power, and hope that they would put the things in place necessary for us to move forward. But the likelihood is that that's going to be a really slow and grueling process. So in the meantime, rather than waiting, can we look in the mirror and say, I'm going to be part of the change that I want to see? And it also talks about how we shouldn't just judge people or react to the end result, because it would be easy for me to say, no, those 3 guys, man, that was so wrong of them. But questions I'm asking is, what influences have gone into their lives that result in them seeing someone like me and wanting to start trouble based on how I look? Those are the kind of questions that I wanna ask and try and answer.
Yeah, and it's powerful. The bits I have seen and the music you have put out. I think it's interesting you approached like the last thing you just said. Like, why are those police officers? Why were those police officers the way they are? Why are those people who attacked you the way they are? And one of the things at Power the Fight is that we very much want to try and equip and train those people in authority to understand the communities and the cultures around us. But the reality is, when you've got reports like the Casey report, which has recently come out, said the police are institutionally racist, but there's been denial in certain quarters, it does make you kind of feel like, well, how do we move forward? This is maybe an unfair question, but how do we move forward?
In the context of this conversation, one thing I will say in response to that question is, I think the institutions like the police need to take their own mental health seriously. So post the attack on myself, I'll come away feeling anxious or have PTSD, for example. My anxiety comes from having coffee thrown in my face, being punched, whatever. If a police officer sees me and automatically thinks, oh, he might have a criminal record, something's gone on there that's made him feel, I don't know, fearful of me, anxious, whatever. Where does that come from? From the police officer? Does that come from him watching one too many Netflix series on what it's meant to be like in the ends? Does it come from him not having enough interactions with the 95% of law-abiding black people that live in our community? They need to look at what mental health decisions or feelings that they're facing to help them move forward. And that doesn't get spoken about enough. I think there's stuff happening up there, man, that they need to come face to face with.
Well, you know, being able to just talk to you Mental Health Awareness Week and just having a conversation, just chopping up with you is always a pleasure and a privilege.
Can I ask you a question before we wrap?
Yeah, go for it.
So in terms of mental health for yourself, when Chelsea keep losing week in, week out, what does that do for you? Because a lot of people don't talk about, you know, football and the effects on your mental. Because you're 11th in the league now, and you go with hope and ambition every week. I see you take your son and that, you go to the games, you're fully invested. How's that for you, man? How do you deal with that stuff?
So I'm going to answer this with a serious answer, because I can see the smile, and everyone can see a smile. But this is a serious point, right? So actually, maybe around November time, when Chelsea weren't as bad as they are now, I realised I was too invested in my team, and the banter was getting too much. And you know, and I know you appreciate this as a West Ham supporter, sometimes you can't watch Match of the Day because it's like, nah, this is actually messing up my weekend. And my wife be like, what's the matter? And I'm like, oh.
You're like eighth match on and that as well. You got to sit through the whole thing.
Chelsea are not even like the first match of the Day anymore. It's like we're like second to last, and I'm like, this is hurting me. But then I had to seriously check myself. I was like, why is this impacting my mood so much? And a couple of things happened. I left some WhatsApp groups, right? Because it's not even that I couldn't take the banter. I just realised that what was coming from me. Because I was like, no, hold on. It was almost like I went back to school. Like, no, I'm letting you know, and I'm cussing. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? I spoke to a couple of my friends. I was like, you know what? I love you all, but I've got to bounce in this group. Like, seriously, because I was like, this is mad. But then more importantly, it was seeing the effect on my son. And I was like, I don't want him to be like me. I don't want him to love football so much that it absolutely terrorises his mood. And that's what was kind of happening last season. What's beautiful there this season, Chelsea are having the worst season in about 25 years. And he's just calm. He's just like, it's football, Dad. You know what I mean? And that's actually...
How old?
He's 10.
That's mad. I remember crying at football games when I was 10.
I was crying at 16 when we lost the cup final. So the fact he's just like, you know, it's football. He wasn't like that last season, but I've seen something. So something about anxiety and just... even the little things, like, you know, people leaving WhatsApp groups. I know when I left that group, the cussage which was
in
that group,
you can't take it.
Can't take it. Then Chelsea, he'll be back when Chelsea. But I was just like, nah, this is not healthy. So, yeah, tongue-in-cheek question, but I think for me, sometimes you just got to make tough decisions to remove yourself from certain environments, even if it's just banter, if it's playing out a little bit crazy.
That's actually really good. I know it started off as a joke, and sorry for all the abuse that I've sent you. I think mine's pretty light, to be honest. But when you read about the effect that losing football games has on things like domestic violence, then it's a very necessary step for some people to put things in place so they're not as invested if they know that they can't control the emotions off the back of a bad result or a bad season, for example.
Just to be clear, it didn't get that bad.
No, not saying you, obviously.
But you're right.
Yeah,
totally. It's something I don't think we appreciate, the small things which can really turn, like you said earlier on, can turn into bigger things if they're not checked. Well, listen, it's always a pleasure. As I said, Mental Health Awareness Week is a big thing. Thank you for being an ambassador of Power to Fight.
It's all good, but I ain't got my invoice has not been paid. What's going on, man?
Bro, we're not paying you, and you need to understand that you don't get paid. You're meant to make money for us.
Okay, I love you lot though, man. Everyone donate to Power to Fight, man. Great charity. I love them. Even if I didn't know Ben, I'd support them. And yeah, man, let's keep giving young people futures because they're entitled to it. They deserve it.
Amen. Thank you, bro. We're going to try and do this one, yeah?